Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Raymond Soriano, a partner at M&G, and we're excited to announce our continued partnership with IDexperts, a leader in the identity protection and data breach services industry. Data breaches like the one Equifax had expose personal data of nearly half the U.S. population and are becoming more frequent because criminals are mining for personal data and information. And because of this, identity theft protection has become one of the fastest growing employee benefit offerings. We're lucky to have Rick Ham, founder of IDexperts, join us today to go over what ID theft is, where it's occurring, and what can be done to prevent and recover from it. Rick, thanks for your time, and let's get this thing started.
Yeah, great, Raymond. Hey, thank you for having me today, and thank you all for joining us for this presentation. My objective over the next several minutes is to talk a little bit about identity theft and really more about what the impact is on employees as well as impact on their employers. And then we'll talk about a very unique identity protection offering and why it makes sense as an employee benefit. And then we'll open it up for questions. So with that, we'll go ahead and get started. Just as a way of brief introduction, Raymond mentioned that I was one of the founders of IDexperts, which is a company based in Portland, Oregon. We started our business 15 years ago in 2003 with the objective of providing an identity protection solution as an employee benefit. Over the last 15 years, our company grew, and we are currently covering a little over 25 million Americans with a very hands-on, white-glove, concierge-level service focused on helping employees who fall victim to identity theft return to pre-theft status quickly and efficiently. We are also the largest provider of identity protection services to the federal government. We were fortunate enough to be in a position in 2015 to help the Office of Personnel Management, which had essentially 4.6 million employee personnel records stolen and roughly 21.7 million background investigation records stolen. We were in a competition with other ID protection companies around the country, and we were awarded, IDexperts was awarded the bid to service those populations. And today, literally almost every federal employee and federal contractor in and around the world is covered by this particular program we'll be talking about today. We were also selected by the Blue Cross Blue Shield Association to offer identity protection to their members. Blue Cross Blue Shield has roughly 106 million members in the 36 plans across the United States. We'll be talking about one of the unique services called MIDAS, the Medical Identity Alert Service that we provide, which is one of the reasons why Blue Cross Blue Shield selected us to offer their members various products and services. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to talk briefly about what identity theft is for those of you who haven't been exposed to it. Net of it is identity theft is a crime. It's a crime that causes financial impact on your financials as well as your medical records. And it essentially, unfortunately, to the victim, causes you to have to do quite a bit of work to undo what the identity thief created. And so what oftentimes happens is an individual will get a call from a creditor or from a collection service saying that they had an unpaid bill. And this is many times how an individual will recognize that they've had an issue. At that point, essentially, it takes somewhere between 30 and 100 hours to unwind all of the issues that an identity thief created. This starts typically with trying to understand what had happened, what issues the identity thief created, and calling every location, every institution that the identity thief used your identity at. So in many cases, it's credit card companies, financial institutions. It may be the DMV, it may be the credit bureaus. In today's environment, it's the healthcare system, so the hospitals, the labs, organizations that were servicing you as a patient. Again, this is a very tedious and time-consuming effort, and that is why back in 2003, IDexperts decided that we would put in place a very unique concierge-level service to help those victims, those employees who fell victim to identity theft, recover to pre-theft status quickly and efficiently, essentially doing the majority of the work on the behalf of the employee under something called limited power of attorney, which allows us to essentially work on your behalf to return you to pre-theft status. So let's talk briefly about the environment that's causing this issue and explosive growth, literally, of identity theft. Raymond mentioned a few of the recent breaches. It turns out that over the last several years, there have literally been thousands of data breaches each year, approximately 1,000 data breaches each year, some of which, as you see on this chart, were relatively large. You'll see it by the size of the circles. Breaches like the OPM, Office of Personnel Management breach on the far right lower corner, which I mentioned earlier, which essentially included all of the federal employees and the contractors that work for the federal government that have been background checked. You see Heartland Payment Systems, which occurred right around the time of President Obama's inauguration. It affected 130 million people. This particular scenario on the screen at this point is the Blue Cross Blue Shield Anthem data breach in 2015. What was unique about this particular breach was it was our first sign that nation states like Russia, China, Iran, Syria, essentially were going after our corporate information. In the case of Blue Cross Blue Shield, essentially 79 million electronic medical records happened to be stolen by the Chinese government. And what was unique about this particular situation was we saw both medical records of children as well as adults exposed. And if you can imagine what's in your medical record, it's everything from your financial information to your health information, your health insurance information, your payment information, and so forth. So this was a very significant breach at that time and literally exposed tens of millions of adults as well as tens of millions of children to child identity theft. Raymond mentioned the Equifax data breach. This was actually one of the largest breaches, unfortunately, that we had seen in the United States. It affected 145.5 million Americans, and it included some very sensitive personal information, including social security numbers, names, addresses, some financial information, and literally affected 1 out of 2 employees in the United States. So, unfortunately, the combination of nation-state actors going after corporate and government information, large corporations experiencing very large breaches, as well as federal and state governments. We're now seeing the majority of the people in the U.S. have some level of risk of being affected by a data breach, which will at some point potentially become identity theft. So here's a few statistics you may not know. There was a study done by Carnegie Mellon a few years ago looking at the impact of child identity theft, and it found that 1 in 10 children is literally an unknowing victim of identity theft. And the reason for this is that the social security number of a child essentially is clean. It's not. It has no credit history, if you will, and it can be combined with any combination of name, address, mother's maiden name, and birth date in particular, to create a false identity that can be used essentially to commit financial or medical fraud. And the reason why a child's identity is so popular with identity thieves is that parents and children, of course, don't check their child's identity. So, unfortunately, a child can be exposed to this problem, if affected, for 10 to 15 years before they decide to go off and get a job once they graduate from high school. or go to college and need a student loan and so forth. And what this study found was literally a child is 51 times more likely to fall victim to identity theft than an adult. So, as I mentioned earlier, the Anthem breach that occurred in February of 2015, when it was announced, started a very significant year of breaches in the healthcare sector. Roughly 252 million electronic medical records were breached that year alone, exposing literally tens of millions of not only children's but also adults' medical records to potential identity theft. So here's a few just statistics around the identity theft problem in terms of growth. In the year 2016, 15.4 million U.S. consumers were victimized by some type of identity theft. And this was up 16% from the year prior. In the year, also the number of U.S. breaches, data breaches tracked at the time, hit an all-time high of 1,093, which was a 40% increase from the year prior. And as I mentioned earlier with the Anthem, the Blue Cross Blue Shield Anthem data breach, we are now seeing identity thieves go after electronic medical records. So essentially, the new problem, the new and growing problem, is this issue of electronic health records being stolen. And it's not only from large health payers, but also from providers and also corporate entities. And that's why the issue today of offering identity protection to employees is so important, because companies maintain both financial information as well as health information on their employees and in some cases their customers. So why is medical identity theft so damaging? When I typically talk to an audience and ask them this question, oftentimes people will think about medical identity theft in the same way they think about financial identity theft. And what I mean by that is financial identity theft, as we talked about at the beginning of the presentation, might create a financial fraud, or someone setting up a credit card on your behalf, or opening a loan, or doing something to get access to your financial accounts at your banking institution. When medical identity, and people will relate those issues to medical identity theft. But it turns out the problem with medical identity theft is not only does it have a financial impact, so as you can see here by the chart, 29% of medical identity theft victims incur a cost exceeding $5,000 to deal with recovery of their identity. But it also takes longer for a recovery to occur from a medical identity theft. 86% of medical identity theft victims take longer than 6 months to resolve this issue because of the multiple entities that are involved in the healthcare industry that essentially house medical data. And so if you can imagine, going into the hospital to receive services, what happens is the physician will be alerted to their systems, the labs and so forth will also be communicated with, as well as the health insurance company and other organizations that may be helping pay for the services that you're receiving. Somewhere between 12 and 15 organizations are alerted to electronic medical systems when you receive medical services. And that's why it takes longer for a person to recover from medical identity theft. So the issue, though, is this particular form of identity theft is unfortunately the fastest growing form compared to other types of identity theft. And it's primarily because the information in an electronic medical record includes not only your financial information, but your health insurance information. And that health insurance information literally is worth 10 to 20 times what a credit card number or social security number is worth in the black market. And it's just like having an American Express Black Diamond card. It has a significant amount of value that can be extracted by the identity thief. And in most cases, they're they do not get caught or identified very quickly because people don't check their medical records. So what are we going to do about this is kind of where I'm going in this part of the presentation. And when we launched back in 2003, we decided that one of the most important components of a service that would be offered as an employee benefit was essentially helping a victim when they realized, or helping an employee when they realized they were actually a victim of identity theft. And so, as I mentioned earlier, we provided essentially this concierge level white glove service when an employee realizes that they have a problem. As you see on this particular chart, that service makes up one of a handful of services that come under my ID Care, which is the IDexperts Complete Identity Protection Solution. And so the way this works essentially is when you enroll, when employees enroll in this particular program, they'll receive a combination of different products and services that are bundled together essentially to help identify when something is going on with their financial credit as well as their medical identity through a series of alerts. So you see at the bottom of the chart, credit and financial marketing. You see at the top of the chart, medical claims monitoring. And you see cyber monitoring. All three of those monitoring services essentially will alert an employee to misuse of any of their personal information, whether it's financial, medical, or other items like phone numbers, addresses, email addresses, and so forth. The other piece of the puzzle is fraud insurance. $1 million of identity theft insurance is included with the program. And that essentially is meant to cover financial fraud. So if you have a situation where your health savings account or an education account or your retirement accounts or other accounts are basically attacked by an identity thief and money is stolen, then that fraud insurance essentially will cover the losses the financial institutions won't cover. And then, of course, the concierge-style ID care specialist, which focuses on helping those people who fall victim to identity theft recover to pre-theft status. The way my ID care works essentially is through your smartphone or your PC, your laptop or PC. And what it does essentially is monitor those items that we talked about earlier, whether it's credit or public records or information on the dark web, as well as your medical claims. It'll send an alert, in this example, to your smartphone. And what it'll say essentially in that alert is that there's been a change to your file, in this case a credit file, and that you need to check essentially our system, the My ID Care system, to see if that particular change was made by you. And if it wasn't, then essentially you select and mark that transaction as suspicious and connect with an identity theft recovery advocate to help you identify what has happened. And if it is identity theft or financial fraud, to help you recover from that. So the key benefits of this particular solution in the context of an employee benefit, it starts literally with helping the employee be more productive and literally have a sense of peace of mind about their personal information and the information that makes up their identity, which includes not only their social security numbers and their health information, but also it includes their credentials, their email addresses, as well as their passwords and other things that they use to identify themselves, not only on public websites like Amazon and others, but also to financial institutions, and in many cases to the companies they work for. The email addresses and credentials, the passwords and so forth, are oftentimes unfortunately used by identity thieves, stolen by identity thieves, essentially to get access to corporate assets. So this is where, the combination of providing an employee benefit, which helps protect the employee, as well as the employer comes into play. Let me explain that for a minute. So if an employee has a email address and a password that they use for work to get access to corporate systems, oftentimes this particular email address or password unfortunately may be used across multiple accounts that the employee has. So whether it's their financial accounts or some other set of accounts, unfortunately, a high number, roughly over 50% of the U.S. population, uses the same set of passwords for all of their accounts, which unfortunately makes it easy for the identity thieves to access not only personal financial information and accounts, but also corporate accounts and information. And so by offering this particular solution, this ID protection solution, the employee is able to protect themselves and also protect the corporate entity that they work for, because they're being prompted essentially to use strong passwords, change them often, to use good hygiene with information that they are stewards of, and basically protect not only their information, but the information of the companies they work for. So the one, again, I mentioned the unique thing about IDexperts and the offering that they have is that there's this claims monitoring solution that is part of the package. Claims monitoring, essentially, the way it works is IDexperts works with the payer of the organization, the employer, essentially to get a claims feed on the employees who elect to have this option started up to IDexperts, which then is forwarded on to the employee's smartphone or to their PC, which allows the employee then to decide whether or not this was something that a service that they received or a prescription that they received. It's a very unique solution. In fact, it's the only one. IDexperts is the only company in the U.S. that offers this particular service, and it was patented back in 2017. So, key to a solution today, you want to be able to cover not only your financial information but also your medical information, which is why IDexperts is offering this unique solution. There are a lot of choices that consumers have around identity protection, and employers have. IDexperts has been in the marketplace for 15 years. Other companies like LifeLock and others have been very visible also in the marketplace. And oftentimes, when we talk to employers and their employees, we'll get the question that, we've seen a lot of LifeLock ads, for example. In fact, it's almost impossible to go anywhere on a plane or a train or a bus without seeing some kind of advertising from LifeLock. Now, the net of it is, they do a great job, advertising their service, and it made the issue of identity theft one that many Americans are aware of at this point. But there are key differences between My ID Care and LifeLock's standard offering. So I just wanted to mention a few of them that are here on this chart. Starting with essentially the cost. It turns out for an individual, the cost of My ID Care versus LifeLock standard product is pretty similar, $849 versus $899 a month. It's where you start to include and cover a family, which in this example covers a spouse and 3 children under the age of 18. You see that in the case of ID Mentor, My ID Care, it's $16.95 a month, compared to LifeLock, which is $37.95 a month. And so cost is a consideration today. And My ID Care is priced as a family-friendly product. The other features include a personal advocate, someone who will be, when you have an issue of identity theft, essentially under limited power of attorney will work on your behalf to return you to pre-theft status. My ID Care focuses on this, and it's actually a specialty item, if you will, in the context of an employee benefit. What I mean by that is one of the most important things when someone of a product in this context is when they realize that they have a problem, is that they have somebody to reach out to, and that's why a personal advocate is important. Another element that, or another feature that has gained prominence is this issue of not reselling or sharing your personal data with other companies. Many of the other companies in the identity protection space, their main income stream comes from selling data, consumer data to other organizations. The credit bureaus, Experian, Equifax, and TransUnion in particular offer identity protection, which back many of the identity protection products on the marketplace, providing credit monitoring. And when you sign up for these products, essentially you're signing up for the terms and conditions of those organizations, as well as those that are providing the protection. In the case of My ID Care, we have a terms and conditions spelled out that we will not resell your personal information. And unfortunately, other companies don't have the same set of terms and conditions. The other that's important is pre-existing conditions, much like a healthcare situation, as you can imagine. Many insurance companies and many ID protection companies will not work on or solve a pre-existing identity theft condition as part of their terms and conditions. It turns out My ID Care was designed to actually help with this, and so we offer that particular set of terms and conditions to help people who've already been fallen victim to identity theft and need our help. Let me just mention a couple more here. Stolen funds reimbursement insurance. For those of you that are in the audience today, probably have a deeper set of knowledge around insurance products, and so you know the details in the small print. And in the case of identity theft insurance, it's the same thing. It turns out if you look at reimbursement for financial fraud as one of the major issues, as an example, My ID Care offers $1 million coverage for the entire policy and up to $1 million covering the financial fraud losses. In the case of other products, they will have sublimits, if you will. In this case, LifeLock has a sublimit on their standard product of $25,000 for financial fraud losses. And again, just kind of just the issue of how many members our organizations covering is an indication of how successful they are. In the case of My ID Care through IDexperts, total number of members covered today, 25.1 million members. LifeLock roughly has 5.2 million members. And so that's essentially a way to compare the success of the various programs. I'm going to turn it over to Raymond for a second, and he'll talk about some of the offerings and the pricing specifically for their customers.
Thanks, Rick. So as you can see, the regular consumer price is at $9.95 for an employee only and $19.95 for the family. And signing up through M&G, you already get a 15% discount with an employee at $8.49 and a family at $16.95. Now, since it's offered through your employer and it's 100% paid by the employer, there's a significant cost savings at $387 for the employee only and $1005 for the family. And then if it's offered through the employer as a voluntary product, that cost goes up just a little bit to $749 for the employee only and $1495 for the family.
So Raymond, I'm going to finish up with just one slide that talks about common risks we all share. Oftentimes, in talking to an audience, I'll ask them, how many of you actually have car insurance? And of course, everybody raises their hand if they own a car. The question becomes, what are the odds of falling victim to a car accident? And the number is 1 in 100 or 645. And many of us pay roughly $100 a month for car insurance. If you compare that to homeowners fire insurance, same issue. The financial impact of having a fire in the home is higher than the potential loss of a car accident. But the odds are 1 in 89 that your home will have a fire, and people will spend, roughly, who have homes, roughly $50 a month to protect their homes. And when I asked how many people have identity theft insurance or an identity theft protection product, unfortunately, not a lot of people will raise their hand because they just haven't thought about it, or are because of the Equifax breach, they may be thinking about it but haven't taken action. And so, unfortunately, the potential losses include not only financial losses, but potential reputational damage if information on your health record is sensitive, as well as risk to health. It turns out medical identity theft, we talked about some of the financial impacts of that. But if you think about your electronic medical record being corrupted, basically being used by an identity thief or multiple identity thieves, what happens is essentially that record starts to reflect their health conditions, so their prescriptions, their blood type, their procedures, and so forth. And essentially your electronic medical record, which your doctor or emergency doctors or others use to determine how to treat you in case you have an issue, becomes corrupted and could actually put life and limb at risk, if you will, risk to your health. The financial impact of identity theft is much higher than that of other risks we face, and the odds, unfortunately, are much higher. So 1 in 20 people fall victim to identity theft in the U.S. every year. And since the Equifax data breach, literally 1 in 2 people have fallen or been affected by the breach of their personal information in the U.S. And again, Raymond mentioned that the program that we're putting in place together with M&G provides this unique benefit at a very affordable price. So with that, Raymond, why don't we turn it over for questions and see if let's open up the lines and see if anybody has questions and we can help answer.
Okay.
Everyone can talk now.
Yeah, so if you have a question, please just go ahead and ask it, and we'll see if we can help address it.
I have a question. Do you guys know when you're going to begin offering this benefit, and is it something that we can do mid-year, or is it something that's pre-tax, post-tax? What does that look like for when we can begin?
Raymond, you want to talk about that? Or
yeah.
Me to address it?
So, we are actually offering it. We're going to through the process of offering it to our clients pretty much anytime they are wanting to sign up. In regards to, and maybe Rick, can you help me with the pre-tax, post-tax question?
Yeah, so it turns out identity protection can be offered in a pre-tax situation as under payroll deduction. So during the normal enrollment cycle, if you're enrolling other benefits and you're doing that through payroll deduction, then that would be a way to do that.
Okay, so it's more up to the employer how they want to enroll it for their workforce.
Exactly. Yeah, so it can be done either through payroll or through credit and debit cards, where the employee pays for it themselves on a voluntary basis. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does.
Okay, great. Thank you for asking the question. Does anybody else have any questions?
Oh, I'm sorry. I forgot. When are you guys going to start offering it? Is it something we can look at right now, or do you guys have a start date to launch with Montgomery and Graham?
Oh, we can offer it right now.
Yeah. So maybe talk about how they would reach out to you to M&G to get more information.
Yeah, so if you are interested, feel free to contact either your agent or account manager, or you can email me directly, raymond.s@mymgteam.com. And then we have some additional information also on our website at mymgteam.com/identity-protection. We are going to be also sending a follow-up email to you as well, just to provide some additional information, some videos that you can watch around some case studies around identity theft as well.
Do you guys have a full benefit summary similar to what my employees would receive for medical, dental, that type of thing?
In regards to the individual benefits of the identity protection?
Yeah, and maybe something they'll just contrast when it's the individual coverage versus the family.
Oh, yes. And we can send that over to you as well.
Okay, and then do you guys have material ready as far as guidance on the claims process, or is there, because it's a monitoring system, is there no claims process so much as notification? You verify that the activity was not valid, and then the process starts on its own.
Yeah, that's basically how it works. So when the employee enrolls and in the service, essentially they're authenticating themselves to our systems, and then they start to receive the alerts. When they see an alert that they don't recognize, that's when it kicks off the we call it the claims process. It's essentially the identity recovery process. At which point, if there are identified fraud losses, IDexperts essentially helps with the claims process.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, great questions. Thank you. Any other questions before we wrap up? No, if not, Raymond, thank you very much for having me today. And
thank you,
I appreciate all of you guys listening. And again, if you have questions, reach out to Raymond's email, which is on the slide. And we look forward to talking to you soon. Thank you.
Thank you all.